Xavier Worthy had a massive performance in the AFC Championship game, while Keon Coleman did not. We'll discuss their dynasty values on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Just download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. And we are breaking down the AFC and NFC championship games from Sunday. Kate, let's start with Chiefs-Bills. Not a ton of takeaways in that game, but one of the things that was very obvious was Xavier Worthy just completely outperformed Keon Coleman. And of course, I'm sure you remember the Bills traded the pick to the Chiefs so that they could move up and select Xavier Worthy, while the Bills went back to the top of round 2, drafted Keon Coleman. I want to start with Worthy, Kate, because 6 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown. Second week in a row that he led all receivers in yards. Also added in 16 yards on the ground in this one. What should be our thoughts on Xavier Worthy moving forward in our dynasty leagues?
He's the wide receiver 1 tied to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I think what was so interesting about this AFC Championship game is that we kind of saw Travis Kelce relegated to a back-end role. Like, we know playoff Travis Kelce, that's usually when we see him take over, but that wasn't the formula this week. The formula was actually very heavily based on the run, on Xavier Worthy, explosive plays on that regard. And we kind of got our first glimpse, I feel like, at what an offense that funnels through Xavier Worthy and the run game and not Travis Kelce could actually look like. And you know what? I have to say, this was just kind of one of their best all-around offensive performances and one of their most cohesive performances, I feel like, that we've seen all season. Like, they looked like the Chiefs.
So we're going to talk about the future of the Chiefs on offense later on the show, but I wanted to talk about Xavier Worthy's dynasty value because I still think, and we're seeing this reflected in the ADP, I think there's some people that are still concerned that either A, he's just a gadget player, which he's clearly not, right? Or B, once Rashee Rice comes back, he's going to be moving down in the pecking order. When I just don't think that's the case. I think Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy fit really well. And when you look at what this offense is going to look like, not at the start of 2025, because we don't think Rashee Rice will be available, but like end of the year, postseason 2026, it feels like Rashee Rice is going to be the guy over the middle of the field, picking up key third downs, basically replacing Travis Kelce. Yep. And Xavier Worthy is going to be the guy that's creating the explosive plays that they're designing touches for. I think this offense can support both of those players.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that is just the fact that they play very different roles in this offense. Like, it's not a duplicative role. It's a role that, like, feels like 2 different positions. Like you mentioned, Rashee Rice plays more of this, like, possession kind of role over the middle of the field. Gonna be kind of that answer against zone coverage. He's gonna find that soft spot against zone. He's going to sit back like Travis Kelce does. And that's always kind of how it's felt for Rashee Rice since he took over that wide receiver 1 role. Xavier Worthy, I do think they're going to have some plays in the playbook where you kind of design touches, maybe a screen pass, maybe an end around. Like, they're going to find like ways to generate specific touches for Xavier Worthy. But I do think, generally speaking, he is going to be more of that prototypical wide receiver 1 that maybe has a little bit more versatility than your typical like Z receiver and the way that they use him around the formation. But I think that's kind of going to be the role as opposed to Rashee Rice being that more traditional slot.
I just don't worry about either of those guys. I think the future is very bright for Kansas City's offense. I mean, obviously they're in the Super Bowl for the third straight year. The future is always going to be bright with Patrick
You've got
Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes. Like,
that's the thing.
Can Patrick Mahomes support two receivers? Yes.
Yes. And I just think you're right. They play such different roles. I think they complement each other so well. I think Xavier Worthy, if Mahomes was just better in the regular season, could have had 1,000 yards. He already had 9 touchdowns. I think you could have had 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns if Mahomes was just a little better. So I'm all in on Xavier Worthy. But a player that I'm not all in on, Kate, is Keon Coleman, who we talked about this going into the playoffs. Coleman had a really big opportunity to show that he could be the future of this Bills offense in 3 playoff games, 8 targets, 3 catches for 22 yards. It just became very obvious in this game that, like, maybe Buffalo made a mistake trading the pick to the Chiefs so they could get Xavier Worthy and not just standing there and picking him.
Yeah, I mean, seeing them like juxtaposed in that way, that was a little bit shocking. And I think we all knew, obviously, Keon Coleman not trending up in the same way that Xavier Worthy was. But again, to see them playing on opposite sides of the ball, that really kind of emphasizes the point of like Kansas City knew what they were getting out of Xavier Worthy. And that was a wide receiver that I think was a bit more polished in general than, most of these prospects coming out. I think there was a lot of concern from people that, maybe he's that one trick pony. Maybe he is, is he just the fast guy? And I think he's very much proven that he's not. But what Keon Coleman has done has just kind of reinforced the fact that he is a contested catch specialist who generally, like, he needs to rely on those contested catches because he's not generating separation. Never has. That's never been a part of his game. That was a huge issue coming out. And look, it's been reflected in the postseason. 37.5% completion percentage on targets from Josh Allen. 45.8% NFL passer rating when targeted by Josh Allen here in the postseason. 0.47 yards per route run. 0.47 yards per route run, Marcus. That is abysmally bad and terribly inefficient. I don't know what the Bills were really thinking. I think this was a huge fumble. And I'm going to be honest, I always thought it was a huge fumble because the Bills needed a guy now. The Bills didn't need a guy that could maybe become the guy. They needed a guy now. Xavier Worthy is the guy now. Maybe Keon Coleman becomes that, but I don't think we've seen anything to this point that indicates that he's on that trajectory.
No, and I think that's exactly right. Like they needed somebody that could come in and help replace Stephon Diggs' production right away. Now, luckily, they did get some of that from like Matt Collins and sometimes from Amari Cooper, but we'll see if what Keon Coleman can do throughout the remainder of his rookie contract, Kate. But including the postseason, he played 16 games this year. In 9 of those games, he had 1 or fewer catches. Like he was just not involved in this offense at all. Maybe once Amari leaves in free agency, or maybe Matt Collins leaves in free agency.
But here's the thing: like Amari and Matt Collins weren't even consistently involved in the offense either.
I know.
That's what I think is so damning about the way that Keon Coleman was kind of thrown to the side. I think the Bills got to the point where they're like, all right, we don't have time for this. Like we don't have time to throw these jump balls and see what happens. Like, no, we need guys that can catch the football. And that's why we've seen Khil Shakir play such an integral role in this offense. Like,
and I wanted to point out, like, in one of the biggest plays in this game, it was a 3rd down on the goal line, and they ran a fade to Keon Coleman. It was like one of his few targets. And it just felt like from the moment the ball was thrown that there was no chance for it to be completed. So if you're not winning in these jump ball contested catch situations, you're not making plays after the catch, you're not getting open. It's really
what are you
hard.
doing?
I know it's really hard to imagine that all of a sudden this gets better. And again, he is a really young player. Maybe it will, but he's not somebody that I'm actively trying to trade for this offseason. Xavier Worthy, I have him in almost every other league, but I want to be aggressive going to get Xavier Worthy, not so much for Keon Coleman.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you're just like, I need, pass catchers attached to Josh Allen, give me Khil Shakir, who I just
Oh,
genuinely
100%.
believe is the better wide receiver at this point. Right now, Keon Coleman, wide receiver 36 in Dynasty startup ADP. That is ahead of players like Josh Downs, 23 years old, who I think has a very bright future. Chris Godwin, I know 28, coming off a serious injury, but still lots of, I think, upside to be untapped there, especially as he hits free agency. There's a lot of like Jalen McMillan, all of these players going in the same area as Keon Coleman that I just think have infinite more upside as it stands today and a much safer floor.
All right, let's talk about some of the biggest winners and losers from the running back position in these conference championship games. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it so easy to post your job for free. You can share it with your network and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job for free. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to get qualified candidates. It's no wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Okay, let's talk about some running back winners from over the weekend. Who do you got?
I mean, Saquon Barkley. Have you heard of this guy, Marcus? Because
I don't know. Will Shipley looked pretty good on his one breakaway run that almost.
I mean, maybe the takeaway here for Dynasty, Will Shipley is the guy and Saquon Barkley is a system RB. I don't know. Just kidding. No, Saquon Barkley,
I believe it.
hashtag good at football, 7.9 yards per carry, had another 60-yard touchdown, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Like, he does it all. And I think we found, obviously, it's a perfect scheme fit. The entire time I was watching this game, I was just wondering, like, what could we have had from Saquon Barkley? Like, when we think of all the touches that went wasted for the New York Giants, like, imagine if we had seen Saquon Barkley on his rookie deal literally anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I think
What
that's a
could have been?
good reminder that you don't take a running back before you have the rest of your offense all set up, because they're just
Mm-hmm.
destined to fail.
Yep.
Once you get the pieces around it, it's like the last thing. If you already have a fire going and you add gas to it, it's going to make it even bigger. But if you don't have a fire going and you just add gas and there's no light, not going to really do much, right? That's what a great running back can do for you. I wanted to mention the running back on the other side, if we're staying with the same game. Brian Robinson, 11 carries for 36 yards. His longest carry was 7 yards. I think a lot of that had to do with Washington's offensive line. No Sam Cosmi, who tore his ACL the week before. But Kate, throughout the playoffs, I thought Brian Robinson, who I've been a big fan of for a long time, was a little underwhelming. 36 carries for 129 yards, only averaged 3.6 yards per carry. He gives you almost nothing as a receiver, 20 receptions in 20 games this year. I think the combination of Austin Eckler, who looked completely washed, and Brian Robinson being underwhelming, I wonder if Washington's going to seriously consider trying to upgrade the running back position this offseason.
And I think they very much should. I think, again, one of those situations where, all right, yes, do they need maybe a little bit more depth at wide receiver? Of
Yes.
course. But it still feels like they're a more complete team than maybe the New York Giants were when they took Saquon Barkley. And, they have that very important part to the puzzle, Jane Daniels. And Jane Daniels, a rushing quarterback who we know, generally speaking, these rushing quarterbacks are less prone to taking those check down plays, because a lot of times when, there's not an open receiver or the play breaks down, they're more prone to take off with their legs instead of, opting for the check down. So like Brian Robinson, yeah, a guy who already didn't have a big element of receiving to his game. You cut that piece of the pie down a little bit more. He just hasn't looked, I think, all that inspiring. He's looked like just a guy here in the postseason.
Yeah.
And I do think that when you have a rusher, like, let's compare adding Saquon Barkley into the mix alongside Jalen Hurts, adding Derrick Henry alongside Lamar Jackson. There is something that opens up that offense. But we all know Brian Robinson Jr., not the same threat of a Saquon Barkley, of a Derrick Henry, and it makes a difference.
So Brian Robinson's going to turn 26 here in a couple months. He's on the final year of his deal in 2025. So I'm not expecting the Commanders to move on from him or anything. I still think he can have a really good role. Where I think Washington is going to try to upgrade this backfield is by adding someone with like legit home run speed. That used to be Austin Eckler. It's not Austin Eckler anymore. It's never been Brian Robinson. So who do they go out and get to try to bring some of that home run speed? Do they draft somebody in rounds 1 or 2? We've been talking about how great this running back class is for a while. Do they go out in free agency and try to get it? This is not a great free agent class. My bet is they go out and try to make a trade. Maybe they try to go get like Travis Etienne in Jacksonville and bring him in. I can't imagine, Kate, that we're going to go into the 2025 season with Brian Robinson being the clear-cut running back here, because they have to add some juice.
I have the perfect addition here if we want to talk trade. Marcus, there's a running back that we speculated maybe could be on the move, and it would make sense depending on which direction the franchise is going. Are they going to rip it down? What about Kenneth Walker, who
Perfect example, yes.
feels like could be that perfect element of speed, explosiveness, and man, you put him alongside Jane Daniels, that's like a legit home run threat every single time one of those two players touches the ball.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be a fun fit to watch. But I think you need a guy that's a little bit better than Brian Robinson Jr. to kind of make that difference. I don't think they need to go all out for a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley, but I do think having somebody that can maybe just consistently make plus plays would do them a lot of good in terms of, the overall trajectory of their run game, both for the running backs and for Jaden Daniels.
I'm going to be really curious about some of the teams that are stuck in the middle. Let me give you an example. The Colts desperately need to add more draft picks and improve their quarterback spot. Could they theoretically trade Jonathan Taylor to a team like the Commanders and try to pick up another second-round pick so they can go up and get a quarterback or to improve their offensive line? I don't know, but I think the Commanders are going to be aggressive trying to find that next home run hitter.
I think they should be. I think that makes a ton of sense, just in general for where the franchise is going. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, if you add just a couple more of these pieces, I think this is going to be an offense that maybe next year, NFC Championship, we'll be looking at them as a team that can post 50 points in a postseason. Maybe not 50, but
I want to just mention James Cook really quickly. 13 for 85 and 2 touchdowns. Also caught 3 passes for 49 yards. I mean, he was unbelievable in the playoffs. In the 3 playoff games, 53 carries for 272 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also added in a bunch of receptions as well. He's going into the final year of his contract. We'll see what Buffalo does there, but there just aren't very many running backs moving forward, Kate, that I trust more than James Cook. Including the postseason, he scored 18 plus 3, 21 touchdowns this year for the Bills. Awesome player.
And let's not forget, that was the biggest critique coming into the season about what could James Cook's ceiling be alongside of Josh Allen. Like, what does his chunk of the pie look like? He did a couple of things this year. Scoring touchdowns was one of them. But the other thing that just kind of popped my eyes open, James Cook looked like a tougher runner, I think, this year than we have ever seen before. He's gaining more yards after contact. Like it felt like early in his career, like once he faced a little bit of that contact, like didn't maybe necessarily have a ton of power to play through that contact, maintain contact balance. I feel like this year was like a huge show me year for him in that regard. Showed a lot more play strength while maintaining a lot of that explosive playmaking ability. He's just looked like a more complete running back to me than he ever has before.
All right, let's talk about the Chiefs again. Not like we're going to have 2 weeks to talk about the Chiefs, but I want to talk about the future of the Kansas City Chiefs because one thing became very apparent in their win over the Buffalo Bills. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting who's going to score the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. There's so many great bets that you can make during the game and before the game. One of my favorite is the octopus bet that hit the last time the Chiefs and the Eagles played. That's where a player scores a touchdown and then immediately scores the 2-point conversion afterwards. I think that's a lot of fun. Go download the app today or head to FanDuel.com to get started and bet just $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kay, let's talk about the Chiefs again. One thing became very obvious in this game. It's that for whatever reason, maybe you can blame injuries, maybe you can blame the situation, but Kareem Hunt is taking over this backfield. We saw the Chiefs use Kareem Hunt more than like we've ever seen Isaiah Pacheco. 17 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown for Kareem Hunt. Also caught a pass. Maybe Pacheco gets healthier this offseason, but it feels like to me they're telling us that Isaiah Pacheco is not the long-term guy here.
Definitely don't think they're leaning in that direction. I do think a big part of that has been health. I mean, I've said it before, Pacheco has not been a guy that they can consistently rely upon for rushing production. He just hasn't been. And a big part of that has been the availability factor. He's dealt with a ton of injuries, whether it be the shoulder, the broken, like it's just kind of been one thing after another for Isaiah Pacheco. His laundry list of injuries is huge, but I know he's a special player. He's a special type of running back. I don't think he's necessarily looked all of that special in the postseason. I think a big part of that probably is just health. We saw, a player like Tony Pollard, who's really explosive, suffered in his return from a lower body injury. I think maybe we're seeing a little bit of the same for Pacheco. But regardless, I think what the Chiefs want to do is have a running back that they can give 16 to 20 carries per game. And, again, take some of this pressure off of Patrick Mahomes. Don't let him play hero ball. Let him be him, but in the context of a game where they're playing some possession football and not just relying on some crazy doodad, off-platform throws. I think they're looking to establish the run, and I just don't see them doing that with Pacheco.
Yeah, and again, this running back class is really, really strong coming up, and maybe the Chiefs won't spend their first round pick on a running back, but they're going to have their second round pick, and they've got a pick at the top of the third round from the Titans in the L'Jarius Sneed trade. We've seen them be aggressive in previous years, like trading up for Xavier Worthy. I wouldn't be surprised, Kate, to see them either use that second round pick or trade up from the third round to try to go get a running back. they don't need a Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry to be good on offense, because they already are a good offense. What I think they're looking for is their version of James Cook, who was on the other side of the field, like somebody that they can give the ball to 16 times and average 5 yards per carry and have a couple big splash plays. If they can find that guy, this offense is going to become even more unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, we just spent the last segment talking about what a good running back could do for an offense that's ascending. Like the Chiefs offense, not ascending, they're already here. But I think it's just that element of stability. I'm going to give you a few stats here from Isaiah Pacheco here through the playoffs. There were 15 running backs with at least 10 carries throughout the postseason so far. Isaiah Pacheco ranks dead last with 3.0 yards per carry per PFF, ranks dead last yards after contact per attempt per PFF. And perhaps the most shocking stat of all, Marcus, not a single carry from Isaiah Pacheco has gone for either a first down or a touchdown. 0%. He is the only one out of those 15 running backs with 10 plus rush attempts in the playoffs that hasn't had a single carry go for a first down or a touchdown. And that feels like where we're at right now with Isaiah Pacheco. It's unfortunate, but the Chiefs need more out of their run game.
And again, Pacheco's still under contract, so he's going to be on this team in 2025. I think it's become clear that they want something different. They just don't feel like Pacheco's maybe the type of running back they want. Maybe they try to get a between the tackle grinder like Kareem Hunt that can actually pop a couple of these runs when they're blocked well. But to me, that seems like the next step of this Chiefs offense is, hey, it's Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy in the passing game, and it's a running back that we feel really good about giving 17, 18 carries a game that can grind out the clock and create some explosive plays. And lucky for the Chiefs, as lucky as they already are, this is a really good running back class where I think they're going to be able to find that player at the end of round 2, top of round 3.
How annoying. The rich get richer, of course. And you know what? The Chiefs, they're a really well-run organization. So yeah, I trust them to make those moves. Now, if they do find an answer at running back, Marcus, does that make you any less excited to draft Patrick Mahomes in a dynasty startup? I think Patrick Mahomes is probably one of the more interesting case studies in terms of dynasty value right now. QB6 in the latest batch of dynasty ADP, 29 years old. We know he's not going anywhere. We know he can do whatever he wants with a football at pretty much whatever time. But
buy Mahomes at that price, because we saw early in the year, like when Rashee Rice was healthy, Mahomes was putting up really good numbers. It's just they had a really hard time adjusting without Rashee Rice for the first 2 months. And then you slowly started to see things get better and better. And it's been awesome in the postseason. I'm buying Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, especially I love to see that, we've had some of that rushing upside unlocked a bit as of late. And we know that's a cheat code as well. But when you provide some of the proficiency from the passing perspective, and then you add in a little bit more upside on the ground, when the Chiefs are willing to let him utilize his legs a little bit. I don't know that we're going to see that consistently in the regular season because, Patrick Mahomes, he doesn't need to. And we got to protect him for a healthy playoff run. But I do think in general, like this Chiefs offense has looked a lot more like the Chiefs offense we expected heading into the season. We were very disappointed for much of the year, but add in one aspect, and that's the running back position. If you add in an upgrade there, I think this is a formula that the Chiefs would be happy to work with moving forward.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.